My son David was everything a father could want, until that December afternoon changed everything. We'd stopped at Fresh Mart, on our way to my daughter-in-law Sarah's parents' house for their anniversary dinner. I needed a good bottle of wine. David waited in the car while I went inside. That's when my old army buddy Frank, now working security, grabbed my wrist near the entrance. His weathered face looked pale. "Mason, your boy's in trouble," he whispered urgently. "Go through the back. You need to see this." The cold December air bit at my face as Frank led me around the building to the employee entrance. My heart hammered against my ribs, though I couldn't say why. Frank had been my squad mate in Vietnam, saved my life twice during the Tet Offensive. If he said something was wrong, I believed him. "Through here," Frank muttered, holding open a gray metal door marked "Employees Only." The fluorescent lights inside made everything look harsh and unforgiving. We walked past boxes of inventory and cleaning supplies until we reached a small security office with multiple monitors covering the walls. Frank pointed to one screen showing the parking lot. There was David's silver Mercedes, the one I'd helped him buy when he made vice president of my construction company. But he wasn't alone. A woman sat in the passenger seat, and even through the grainy footage, I could tell she was expensively dressed. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and she wore what looked like a designer coat. "Who is she?" I asked, though part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know. Frank adjusted the monitor angle. "Laura Whitman. Been watching them meet up for 3 months now. Always the same pattern. Your boy hands her an envelope, she gives him something back." The name hit me like a sledgehammer. Whitman, as in Judge Harold Whitman. His wife, Frank, confirmed, pulling up recorded footage on another screen. "The same judge who ruled against your company in that lawsuit last spring. $8 million. That's what that ruling had cost Mason Construction. A lifetime of building my business, creating jobs for hundreds of families, nearly destroyed by one judge's decision. We'd been accused of safety violations that were completely fabricated, but Judge Whitman wouldn't even look at our evidence." "Watch this," Frank said, clicking through files on his computer. The screen filled with dozens of video clips, all dated and time-stamped. "First, notice them in September. Your boy comes here every couple weeks always, when he tells you he's somewhere else." I watched David and Laura in clip after clip. In some, they sat in his car. In others, they met by her black BMW in the far corner of the lot. Always there was an exchange. David would hand over a manila envelope, and she'd give him something in return, usually a thick white envelope that he'd quickly tuck inside his jacket. "Frank, this could be anything," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. "Maybe I don't know." "Keep watching," Frank said grimly. He clicked on a file from 2 weeks ago. This time the camera had caught them at a better angle. I could see David's face clearly as he handed over what looked like blueprints. Laura examined them carefully before sliding an envelope across the console. My phone buzzed. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. "Where are you two moms starting to worry about dinner getting cold?" "Long lines at checkout." I lied, the words tasting bitter. "We'll be there soon." Frank ejected a flash drive from the computer and pressed it into my palm. "Everything's on here. 3 months of meetings, Mason. I'm sorry." I stared at the small device, feeling its weight, despite it being nearly nothing. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Wanted to be sure. Thought maybe I was wrong." Frank's voice carried the weight of our shared history. "But after what I saw today..." He pointed back to the live monitor. Laura was leaning close to David, her hand on his chest. Then, before I could process what was happening, she kissed him. Not a friendly peck, but a deep, passionate kiss that my son returned with enthusiasm. The security office suddenly felt airless. My David, married for 12 years, father of my grandson, was kissing the wife of the judge who'd nearly ruined us. The pieces clicked together in my mind, like bullets sliding into a chamber. "There's more," Frank said quietly. "Been doing some checking. Laura Whitman's got a gambling problem. Owes big money to some dangerous people. And your boy." Mason, I think he's been selling information about your company's bids. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. All those contracts we'd lost in the past year, always underbid by just enough to knock us out. The mysterious leaks about our pricing strategies. David had access to everything as vice president. I'd given him that access because he was my son, my legacy. I have to go, I managed to say, pocketing the flash drive. Thank you, Frank. What are you going to do? I thought about Sarah and my grandson waiting at dinner, about the company I'd built with my bare hands over 40 years, about the son I'd taught to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to be a man of integrity. I don't know, I admitted, but I need to find out how deep this goes. Frank walked me to the back door. Be careful, Mason. People who get in bed with the Whitmans tend to end up buried. I made my way back through the store, grabbing the first bottle of wine I saw. My hands shook as I paid, and the teenage cashier asked if I was feeling all right. I forced a smile and said something about the cold weather. David was scrolling through his phone when I got back to the car. He looked up with that easy smile I'd once been so proud of. Finally thought you'd gotten lost in there, Dad. You know how it is, I said, settling into the passenger seat. Couldn't decide between the Merlot and the Cabernet. He laughed, the sound now hollow to my ears. As we drove towards Sarah's parents' house, I studied my son's profile. When had he become a stranger? When had the boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during baseball games become someone who could betray everything I'd taught him? You okay, Dad? David asked, glancing over. You're awfully quiet. Just thinking about your mother, I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. Margaret had died 5 years ago from cancer, and I often wondered what she'd think of what our family had become. She always loved these family dinners. Yeah, David said softly. Me too. The rest of the drive passed in silence. I clutched the flash drive in my pocket, like a grenade with the pin already pulled. Through the windshield, the Christmas decorations on the suburban houses looked garish and false. Everything felt different now, tainted by the knowledge of what my son had become. As we pulled into the driveway of Sarah's parents' house, warm light spilling from the windows, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront David yet. First, I needed to know everything. The full scope of his betrayal, how long it had been going on, who else was involved. Because if my son had truly sold us out to the Whitmans, if he'd destroyed everything I'd built for 30 pieces of silver, then he would learn what happened when you betrayed Mason Cooper. He would learn that his old man might be 65, but he hadn't survived Vietnam and built a construction empire by rolling over when someone tried to destroy him, even if that someone was his own flesh and blood. Sarah met us at the door, her face glowing with warmth and happiness. She kissed David and hugged me, taking the wine with a grateful smile. Thank goodness you're here. Dad's been telling his fishing stories for the past hour. The house smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon candles. Sarah's parents, Thomas and Helen, had decorated every surface with anniversary memorabilia from their 35 years together. My grandson, little Marcus, ran up and wrapped his arms around my legs. Grandpa Mason, Mom says I can stay up late tonight. I lifted him up, his weight a comfort against the churning in my stomach. That's great, buddy. Maybe we can play that board game you like. Throughout dinner, I forced myself to act normal. I laughed at Thomas's stories, complimented Helen's cooking, and helped Marcus cut his turkey. But my eyes kept drifting to David. He seemed perfectly at ease, joking with his in-laws, helping Sarah serve dessert, playing the role of devoted husband and son. Mason, you must be proud, Thomas said, raising his wine glass. David was telling me at the country club last week about all the new contracts Mason Construction has been bidding on. The country club. I kept my voice casual. I didn't know you'd been going there, son. David shrugged. Just networking, Dad. You always taught me the importance of connections. Indeed. Thomas nodded. Saw him there with some impressive business associates. That woman, what was her name? The one married to the judge. My hand tightened on my fork. David's expression didn't change, but I saw Sarah glance at him with slight confusion. I meet a lot of people, David said smoothly. Can't remember them all. The conversation moved on, but Sarah's eyes lingered on her husband with a question in them. 20 minutes later, I excused myself to use the bathroom, my head spinning, with the need to process what I'd learned. In the privacy of the small powder room, I pulled out my phone and the flash drive. My hands trembled as I found an adapter in my wallet that I used for business presentations. The first video loaded, and there they were. David and Laura Whitman in the Freshmart parking lot, dated September 15th. I fast-forwarded through several meetings, my heart sinking further with each one. Then, I found one with audio. David's voice came through tinny, but clear. My father trusts me completely. He has no idea what the Baker Group is planning to bid. Laura's response chilled me. Perfect. Harold needs to know their bottom line before the hearing next week. The Baker Group. They'd won a $15 million city contract we'd been sure was ours. We'd lost by less than 2% on the bid. Now I knew why. A knock on the door made me jump. Mason! Helen's voice called. Are you all right in there? Fine. I called back quickly, closing the video. Be right out. I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. The man looking back seemed older than my 65 years. When had those lines gotten so deep? When had my shoulders started to stoop? Back at the table, Sarah was in the middle of an announcement. Her face glowed as David held her hand. We wanted to wait until everyone was together, she said. We're having another baby. The room erupted in congratulations. Helen cried. Thomas opened champagne, and Marcus danced around shouting about being a big brother. I forced myself to smile and hug them both, even as my heart broke. Another grandchild, who would grow up with a father in prison. This calls for a toast, Thomas declared, pouring champagne for everyone. As he spoke about family and legacy, I noticed David checking his phone repeatedly. Each time his face would tighten slightly before he forced it back to a smile. After dinner, as Helen showed Sarah baby photos, and Thomas entertained Marcus, David approached me in the living room. Dad, I've been thinking about the company. Oh. I settled deeper into the armchair, noting how he positioned himself between me and the others. The lawsuit really hurt us. We're still recovering. He sat on the ottoman, leaning forward earnestly. Maybe it's time to consider selling. You could retire, travel, enjoy life. The company is my life, I said carefully. Built it from nothing. I know, and you've done amazing things. But times are changing. The big corporations are squeezing out family businesses like ours. His phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, then quickly tucked it away. I just want what's best for you. What's best for me? The words rang hollow from someone who'd been selling our secrets to our enemies. I thought about all the times over the past year when David had suggested I was getting too old for the stress, that I should step back. Let him handle more. I'll think about it, I lied. Maybe you're right. Relief flashed across his face so quickly, I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching for it. Really? That's great, Dad. We could start by having you transfer some of the daily operations. Mason. Sarah appeared in the doorway, saving me from hearing more of my son's plans. Mom found our wedding album. Come look. As we flipped through photos of happier times, Sarah leaned close to me. Mr. Cooper, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. And it's Mason, remember? She smiled, but worry creased her forehead. Have you been giving David bonuses? I found some bank statements when I was organizing for taxes. Large deposits, he said, were from work, but they don't match his regular pay schedule. My blood chilled. How large? 10,000–15,000 at a time. Always cash deposits. She glanced toward where David was helping Marcus with a puzzle. I wasn't snooping, with the new baby coming, I wanted to understand our finances better. Sarah, I said carefully, do you still have those statements? She nodded. In my home office. Why is something wrong? I'm not sure yet, but would you mind if I looked at them sometime? Might be a bookkeeping error at the company. Of course. She touched my arm. Mason David's been different lately. Secretive. He says it's work stress, but you know your husband, I finished. Trust your instincts, Sarah. And know that no matter what happens, you and the children will always be family to me. Her eyes widened at the seriousness in my tone, but before she could respond, David appeared. What are you two whispering about? Just telling your father how lucky I am, Sarah said, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes now. The drive home was torture. David talked about the new baby, about plans for expanding the house, about Marcus starting school next year. Normal father-son conversation, except now I heard the lies underneath every word. When he mentioned the company's struggles again, suggesting maybe I should give him power of attorney, just in case something happens. I had to clench my jaw to keep from screaming. You know, son, I said as we pulled into my driveway, your mother used to say trust was like a mirror. Once it's broken, you can put it back together, but you'll always see the cracks. He laughed uncomfortably. That's pretty deep for this late at night, Dad. You sure you're feeling okay? Never better, I lied. Just thinking about legacy, I guess. What we leave behind. After he drove away, I stood in my driveway, staring up at the stars. Margaret and I used to stand here on summer nights, planning our future, dreaming about grandchildren and family dinners and growing old together. She died believing our son was a good man. Maybe that was a mercy. Inside, I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat at my desk. The flash drive felt heavier than before as I plugged it into my computer. This time, I watched everything. Every meeting, every exchange, every betrayal cataloged in digital clarity. By 3 in the morning, I'd filled a legal pad with notes. Dates, times, patterns. David met Laura exactly 2 days before every major bid submission. The deposits Sarah mentioned matched the dates of our lost contracts. My son hadn't just betrayed me. He'd built a systematic operation to destroy everything I'd created. The bourbon burned my throat as I considered my options. I could confront him, but he'd deny everything. I could fire him, but that would only drive the corruption deeper underground. I could go to the police, but without solid evidence of what was in those envelopes, they'd have nothing. No, I needed to be smarter than that. David thought his old man was getting weak, ready to be pushed aside. He thought 30 years of comfortable living had made me soft. He'd forgotten that before I was a successful businessman, before I was a father and grandfather, I was a soldier. And soldiers knew how to fight wars. They knew how to gather intelligence, plan operations, and most importantly, they knew how to wait for the perfect moment to strike. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Found more statements. Goes back over a year. Please help. I texted back, we'll figure this out together. Keep everything safe. Don't mention to David. The corrupt judge, the gambling debts, the systematic betrayal of the company, a daughter-in-law who was starting to see the truth, and a son who thought his father was a fool. All the pieces were on the board now. David wanted to play games with our family's future fine, but he'd forgotten one crucial thing. I'd taught him everything he knew about business. But I hadn't taught him everything I knew about war. The next morning, I met James Morrison at a diner on the outskirts of town. He looked like any other retired businessman grabbing breakfast, but his eyes still carried the sharp awareness of his 30 years with the FBI. We'd met through a veterans organization, and I'd never imagined I'd need his particular skills. Mason, he greeted me sliding into the booth. You sounded serious on the phone. I pushed the flash drive across the table. I need your help, James. Discreetly. Over coffee and eggs, I laid out what I knew. James listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes in a small pad. When I finished, he leaned back and whistled low. Judge Whitman, that's a dangerous enemy to have. I'm not looking to make enemies, I said. I just want to know how deep this goes. James pocketed the flash drive. Give me a week. I still have contacts who can dig into things quietly. What are you going to do about David in the meantime? Play the fool, I said grimly. Let him think he's winning. That afternoon, I called David into my office at Mason Construction, the building I'd bought with my first big contract, where he'd played with toy trucks under my desk as a child, where I'd taught him to read blueprints and calculate estimates. Dad. He entered with that easy confidence designer suit, perfect, not a hair out of place. You wanted to see me? Sit down, son. I shuffled some papers on my desk, letting my hands shake slightly. I've been thinking about what you said, about retirement. His eyes lit up like a predator scenting wounded prey. Really? Maybe you're right. I'm tired, David. The lawsuit, your mother's death, it's all catching up to me. I rubbed my temples, adding a weary sigh. I want you to take on more responsibility. Start handling the major bids yourself. Dad, I'm honored. You won't regret this. Wouldn't I? I pulled out a folder containing our bid for the new city hospital complex. $40 million worth of work that would keep us busy for 3 years. Start with this. The sealed bid is due next month. Think you can handle it? He practically snatched the folder from my hands. Absolutely. I won't let you down. After he left, I made 2 phone calls. First to our head of accounting, asking her to create duplicate files for everything David could access, but with slightly different numbers. Then to Carl Brennan, my lawyer for the past 20 years. Carl, I need you to review some documents. Quietly. Can you meet me at your home office tonight? That evening, Carl's face grew increasingly grim as he examined the papers I'd brought. Contracts with David's signature, authorization forms, financial transfers. Mason, these signatures. Some of them aren't yours. I know. This is forgery. Federal crime. Your own son. I thought about Marcus playing with his toys, about the new baby on the way, about Sarah's worried face. Can you document everything without filing anything yet? Of course. But Mason, if he's done what you suspect, you need to protect yourself. He could be setting you up to take the fall. That night, I installed hidden cameras in my office and study at home. Military-grade equipment that would capture everything in high definition. Then, I went through my files, finding more evidence of David's betrayal. Contracts lost by suspicious margins, proprietary information that had somehow leaked to competitors, patterns I'd been too trusting to see before. James Morrison called 3 days later. We need to meet. Not the diner. Too public. We met at the Veterans Hall where we'd first become acquainted. The empty meeting room felt appropriately somber for what he had to tell me. Laura Whitman owes $2.3 million to some very unpleasant people. He began spreading out printed documents. Started with horse racing, escalated to underground poker games. Judge Whitman has no idea. He's been too busy taking bribes to notice his wife's problem. Taking bribes. Oh yes. Your son isn't her only source. She's running a whole operation selling information from multiple companies to their competitors. Then she feeds that money to her husband's campaign contributors, who make sure he rules in their favor. The photos showed more than David thought they did. Look here. He pointed to enhanced images from the parking lot footage. See the logos on those folders: McKenna, Development, Fortress Engineering, Coastal Builders. All companies that mysteriously started winning bids they had no business knowing about. My stomach turned. This wasn't just about David betraying me. This was a conspiracy that could destroy dozens of businesses, hundreds of families' livelihoods. There's more, James continued. Your son opened accounts in the Cayman Islands 6 months ago. The deposits match what you lost on those contracts, minus what I assume is Laura's cut. How much? $800,000 so far. But Mason, I found something else. Communications between David and Laura about you. They're not just stealing from you. They're planning to frame you for tax evasion using those forged documents. Make it look like you've been hiding money offshore. The room spun. My own son was planning to send me to prison. When I managed to ask. Soon. They're waiting for one more big score. Then, David files the papers claiming he discovered your fraud, takes over the company as the whistleblower hero, and you spend your retirement in federal prison. I stood and walked to the window, staring out at the flag flying over the memorial garden. How many times had David and I stood here together on Veterans Day? How many times had he heard me talk about honor and integrity? "What do you need me to do?" James asked quietly. "Keep digging, document everything, and—" I turned back to face him. "See if your FBI contacts might be interested in a bigger fish than just my son." Over the following weeks, I became the greatest actor of my life. I complained about fatigue, mentioned chest pains that didn't exist, forgot important meetings. David hovered like a vulture, all false concern and eager helpfulness. "Dad, you should see a doctor," he said one afternoon, finding me napping at my desk. "Maybe you're right. All this stress." I let my voice trail off weakly. "Listen, why don't you let me handle the Richardson account too? You need to focus on your health." The Richardson account was worth $12 million. I hesitated just long enough to seem reluctant, then nodded. "If you think you can manage it." His smile was pure greed. "Trust me, Dad. I've got everything under control." That night, I met with Patricia Hayes, the federal prosecutor James had contacted. She was a small woman with steel in her spine and eyes that had seen too much corruption. "Mr. Cooper, what you're describing is a RICO case. Racketeering, conspiracy, judicial corruption. If even half of what you've shown me is true, we're talking about dozens of people going to prison." "I want them all," I said flatly. "Every judge who took a bribe, every contractor who bought information, everyone who profited from destroying honest businesses." "And your son?" I thought about teaching David to ride his bike, his fearless determination, even after falling dozens of times. "Especially my son." She studied me for a long moment. "This won't be easy. We'll need you to wear a wire, gather more evidence. Can you do that? Can you help us build a case against your own child?" "He's not my child anymore," I said, meaning it. "He's just another criminal who happens to share my DNA." We spent 3 hours planning the operation. I would continue playing the declining patriarch while secretly recording everything. The FBI would monitor the offshore accounts, track the money flows, build profiles on everyone involved. "There's one more thing," Patricia said as we prepared to leave. "We've been investigating Judge Whitman for 2 years. Your evidence might be the breakthrough we need. But these people are dangerous when cornered. You need to be careful." Careful. I thought about Frank's warning about the people who ended up buried for crossing the Whitmans. But I also thought about all the honest contractors driven out of business, all the workers who'd lost jobs, all the families destroyed by this corruption. I didn't survive Vietnam to be scared of a crooked judge and his gambling addict wife, I told her. The next day, I gave David access to the federal hospital bid. The real one, not the duplicate with false numbers. $40 million of bait for a trap that would destroy him. He took the bait eagerly, practically glowing with anticipation. "This is it, Dad. This contract will secure our future." Our future. As if he hadn't been planning to destroy mine. "I'm counting on you, son." I said, the words ash in my mouth. "Don't let me down." That weekend, Sarah called. "Mason, can you come over? David's at the golf course and I found something." I found her in their home office, surrounded by papers. Her face was pale, her hands shaking as she showed me what she'd discovered. "I was looking for our insurance papers, and I found these." She handed me a folder containing emails between David and someone identified only as LW. The messages were carefully worded, but the meaning was clear. Meetings, arranged payments, discussed packages to be delivered. "Sarah, that's not all." She pulled up bank statements on her computer. "I tracked the deposits. They match dates when you lost major contracts. Mason is David. Is he stealing from the company?" I sat down heavily, suddenly feeling every one of my 65 years. "How much do you know about what's been happening with the business?" "I know we've been struggling since the lawsuit. David says it's just bad luck that competitors are getting inside information somehow." Her voice broke. "It's him, isn't it? He's the leak." "I'm afraid it's worse than that." I told her everything. The affair with Laura Whitman, the conspiracy with Judge Whitman, the offshore accounts, the plan to frame me. I watched her world crumble with each revelation, saw the moment her love turned to horror. "The baby," she whispered, hand going to her still flat stomach. "I'm having a criminal's baby." "You're having my grandchild," I said firmly. "And no matter what happens to David, you and the children will always be family. I promise you that." She started crying then, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. I held her while she wept, this young woman who'd loved my son truly and been repaid with betrayal. "What am I going to do?" she asked when the tears finally stopped. "First, you're going to protect yourself and the children. Move any joint assets into accounts only you control. Document everything you found. And Sarah, get a lawyer. A good one." "I can't afford—" "I'll take care of it. Carl Brennan will recommend someone. This isn't your fault, sweetheart. You and the kids shouldn't suffer for David's choices." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "He's been different, Mason. Colder. Sometimes I catch him looking at me like I'm a problem to be solved. And the way he talks about you. What does he say? That you're getting old, confused. That maybe it would be better for everyone if you were in a nice assisted living facility." She met my eyes. "He's been researching places, ones where residents can't manage their own finances." So, that was the end game. Destroy my reputation, steal my company, and lock me away where I couldn't fight back. My son had thought of everything. Except he'd forgotten one thing. Before you can bury someone, you have to kill them. And I wasn't dead yet. I called Frank the next morning. "Remember what you said about being careful? I think it's time we stopped being careful and started being smart." We met at the construction site for the new elementary school, one of the few contracts we'd managed to keep. The sound of heavy machinery provided cover for our conversation. "I need your help, Frank. What I'm about to ask might be dangerous." He spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Mason, you saved my life twice in Nam. Whatever you need." I outlined my plan while we walked through the half-built structure. Frank would coordinate with site security to install additional cameras at the office, hidden ones that even David wouldn't know about. We needed to catch him in the act of stealing documents, meeting with Laura, anything that would prove the conspiracy. "What about your house?" Frank asked. "Already wired. Military-grade equipment in every room he might use." "Just like setting up a firebase perimeter," Frank grinned. "Except this time, Charlie is your own kid." That afternoon, I called a meeting with my senior staff. David sat at my right hand, every inch the heir apparent. I noticed how the others deferred to him now, how he'd been building his own power base while I wasn't watching. "I wanted you all to know that I'm planning to semi-retire soon," I announced, watching their faces carefully. Most looked surprised. A few seemed worried. David's expression was pure satisfaction. David will be taking on more responsibility, starting with the federal hospital bid. "Dad, are you sure you're ready for this?" David asked, playing the concerned son perfectly. "I'm tired, son. Maybe it's time for new blood to lead Mason Construction into the future." After the meeting, my foreman Miguel Santos pulled me aside. He'd worked for me 22 years, starting as a laborer and working his way up. "Boss, no disrespect, but are you sure about this, David? He's been making changes, bringing in his own people. Some of us old-timers are worried." "Keep your eyes open, Miguel, and document anything unusual. Can you do that for me?" His weathered face set in determined lines. "You got it, boss. We've got your back." That night, I had dinner with Thomas at his country club. Sarah had confided in her father, and he wanted to help. "I've been watching David here for months," Thomas said over brandy. "Always with that woman, sometimes with others. Shady-looking types. Not the kind of connections a legitimate businessman makes. I need to know who he's meeting when what they discuss. Can you help with that? Mason, you gave my daughter a good life, my grandson a future. Of course I'll help." He paused, studying his drink. "You know, I always wondered why a smart man like David seemed so eager to see you step aside. Now I understand. He can't steal effectively with you watching." I gave him one of Frank's secure phones. Use this if you see anything important. And Thomas, be subtle. These people have already destroyed one judge who got in their way. I don't want you becoming a target. The next phase required delicate timing. I scheduled a doctor's appointment, making sure David knew about it. Then, I had Dr. Mitchell, an old friend, write a report suggesting I was showing signs of stress-related confusion. Nothing serious, just enough to support David's narrative that I was declining. I don't like this, Mason, Dr. Mitchell said. Falsifying medical records goes against everything I believe in. It's not false. I am stressed. I am confused. Just not the way the report suggests. I met his eyes. Someone is going to prison when this is over, Doc. I'd rather it not be me. With my declining health documented, David became bolder. He started making decisions without consulting me, authorizing expenditures, meeting with clients privately. Each overstep was carefully recorded by our hidden cameras. James Morrison called with an update. The FBI is very interested. Patricia Hayes has assembled a task force. They've identified 17 companies that have been victims of this scheme, 12 judges who've taken bribes, and a network of corrupt contractors, all feeding information to the Whitmans. How long before they move? They want the whole network. That means waiting until everyone reveals themselves. Your federal hospital bid is the key. It's big enough to bring all the players out of hiding. The federal bid. $40 million that would either save my company or destroy my son. I'd built my life on concrete and steel, on handshake deals and honest work. Now I was playing a game of shadows and lies, and the stakes were everything I'd ever loved. That weekend, I visited Margaret's grave. The headstone was simple, the way she'd wanted it. Just her name, the dates, and beloved wife and mother. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, I told the silent stone. He's our son, Maggie, the boy who used to build sandcastles and dream about being just like his dad. How do I send him to prison? The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and for a moment I could almost hear her voice. She'd always been the stronger one, the one who saw things clearly. He made his choice, I said aloud, answering my own question. Now I have to make mine. Monday morning brought a new development. David approached me with papers, his face a mask of filial concern. Dad, I've been thinking. With your health issues, maybe we should make some arrangements, just in case something happens suddenly. The papers were power of attorney forms, comprehensive ones that would give him complete control over my personal and business finances. This seems pretty extensive, I said, pretending to struggle with reading them. It's just a precaution. You know I'd never do anything without consulting you. The lie came so easily to him. But if you had another episode like last week. Episode? You don't remember. You got confused during the Richardson meeting, called the client by the wrong name, quoted the wrong figures. He leaned forward, all false sympathy. It's okay, Dad. It happens at your age. None of that had happened, but two of David's allies had been in that meeting. They'd swear to whatever he told them to. I was watching my son build a case for my incompetence, brick by lying brick. Let me think about it, I said, folding the paper slowly. This is a big decision. Of course, take your time. But Dad, don't wait too long. We need to protect the company. After he left, I called Patricia Hayes. He's accelerating the timeline. We need to move soon. Can you hold out another 2 weeks? We're so close to having everyone in the net. 2 weeks. I thought about David's hungry eyes, Laura Whitman's gambling debts, Judge Whitman's corrupt verdicts. 2 weeks of pretending to be weak while wolves circled. I'll manage, I told her. Just make sure that net is strong enough to hold them all. That night, I sat in my study reviewing 40 years of business records. Every contract honestly bid, every building proudly constructed, every worker's paycheck fairly earned. I'd built something real in this world, something that mattered. David thought he could steal it with forged signatures and offshore accounts. He thought his old man was just another obstacle to remove. But I'd learned long ago in the jungles of Vietnam that the most dangerous enemy was the one who underestimated you. who saw gray hair and assumed weakness, who mistook kindness for stupidity, who confused love with blindness. My phone buzzed. A message from Frank. Spotted them together again. Got everything on video. The woman gave your boy something interesting. Looked like building plans. Building plans. For the federal hospital, no doubt. The bid wasn't due for another week, but Laura would want time to shop the information around, find the highest bidder among our competitors. I poured a glass of bourbon and raised it to Margaret's photo on my desk. Our boy's about to learn a hard lesson, sweetheart. Sometimes the person who destroys you is the one you trust most. And sometimes the old wolf still has teeth. The trap was set. The cameras were rolling. The FBI was watching. Now, all I had to do was wait for my son to hang himself with the rope I'd so carefully provided. I scheduled the family dinner for Thursday evening, calling it a celebration of my retirement decision. The guest list was carefully chosen: David and Sarah Thomas, and Helen, my foreman Miguel, and his wife Carl Brennan, and his wife, and a few other close family friends. What David didn't know was that FBI agents would be stationed in vehicles outside warrants ready, waiting for my signal. The afternoon of the dinner, Patricia Hayes called one last time. "Are you ready for this, Mason? Once we move, there's no going back." "I've been ready since the moment I realized my son was a traitor," I said. "Just make sure your people are in position." I spent the morning preparing my study, where I knew David would push for the signing. The hidden cameras were checked and double-checked. In the safe, instead of the federal bid information, David expected I'd placed a manila folder that would change everything. Sarah arrived early with Marcus, her face drawn, but determined. She'd filed separation papers that morning, though David didn't know yet. "I'm scared, Mason," she admitted while Marcus played in the garden. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," I told her. "It's doing what's right despite the fear. You're the bravest woman I know, Sarah." David arrived at 6, sharp designer suit immaculate, playing the dutiful son to perfection. He kissed Sarah's cheek, not noticing how she stiffened at his touch. He ruffled Marcus's hair, not seeing how the boy pulled away slightly. All his attention was on me and the papers in his briefcase. "You look good, Dad," he said, though his eyes were calculating my every move. "Rested." "Amazing what a few good nights' sleep can do," I replied. "Come, everyone's in the dining room." The dinner was a masterpiece of tension disguised as celebration. Helen had helped prepare my Margaret's famous pot roast, the one David had always loved as a child. Thomas kept the conversation flowing with stories and jokes. Miguel spoke about the early days of the company, when it was just me and 5 workers building our first house. Through it all, David checked his phone obsessively. Each buzz made him more agitated, though he tried to hide it. I knew Laura was texting him demanding the federal bid information. Her creditors were pressing, and $40 million worth of inside information would solve many problems. "A toast," I said, finally raising my glass. "To family, to loyalty, to the values that matter more than money or success." Everyone raised their glasses, even David, though his smile was strained. "To family," he echoed the words, a mockery from his lips. "You know," I continued, still standing, "Margaret always said a man's true character is revealed not when he's winning, but when he thinks no one is watching. She was right about most things." David's phone buzzed again. This time he didn't even try to be subtle about checking it. "Important business, son?" I asked mildly. "Actually, yes." He stood, seizing the opening. "Dad, could we talk in your study? I have those papers we discussed, and with everyone here as witnesses." "Of course." I nodded to the others. "We'll just be a few minutes. Carl, why don't you join us? Always good to have a lawyer present for important documents." David's jaw tightened, but he couldn't object without seeming suspicious. The 3 of us walked to my study, leaving behind the warmth of family for the cold business of betrayal. In the study, David wasted no time. "Dad, I really think we should do this tonight. The power of attorney, I mean. With Carl here, we can make it official." There's something I want to show you first, I said, moving to the safe. Something about the federal bid. His eyes lit up with greed. Oh! I turned the dial slowly, letting him see each number. He probably had a camera somewhere recording the combination, planning to come back later. The safe opened with a soft click. Before we proceed, I said, my back to him, I need to know something. Why, David? Was it just money? What are you talking about? But his voice had changed, becoming wary. The meetings with Laura Whitman, the information you've been selling, the offshore accounts. I pulled out the manila folder and turned to face him. I know everything. For a moment, his mask slipped completely. I saw rage, calculation, and something else. Contempt. You know nothing, old man. You're confused. Remember, everyone knows you've been making mistakes, forgetting things. Like the Richardson meeting where I supposedly called the client by the wrong name. The meeting where Miguel says I was perfect, but your friends claim otherwise. Carl shifted uncomfortably. As my lawyer, he'd stay quiet, but his presence meant David couldn't get physical. You're paranoid, David said, but sweat beaded on his forehead. This is exactly why you need to step down. You're seeing conspiracies everywhere. I opened the folder and spread its contents on my desk. FBI surveillance photos of him with Laura, bank records from the Cayman Islands, transcripts of recorded conversations. His face went white. How did I find out? Or how could you do this to me? I sat down heavily. I'm more interested in the second question. David's phone buzzed insistently. He glanced at it, and I saw Laura's name on the screen. The mask fell away entirely, then replaced by someone I didn't recognize. You want to know why? He laughed bitterly. Because I'm tired of waiting. Tired of being Mason Cooper's son instead of my own man. Do you know what it's like growing up in your shadow? Never good enough. Never measuring up to the great Mason Cooper, who built an empire from nothing. So you decided to destroy it. I decided to take what should have been mine years ago. He slammed his hands on the desk. You should have retired after Mom died. But no. You had to keep holding on, keeping control, making me beg for scraps of responsibility. I gave you everything. Education, position, trust. You gave me chains. The words exploded out of him. Every success was because of you. Every failure was mine alone. Well, I found someone who appreciates my talents. Someone who sees my worth. Laura Whitman sees your access to information worth millions, I said quietly. That's all. You're wrong. We have plans. Once you're out of the way, declared incompetent, locked up in some facility, I'll merge the company with her connections. We'll build something 10 times bigger than your pathetic family business. Carl made a sound of disgust. David whirled on him. What, you think I care about your judgment? You're just another relic like him. The safe, I said, drawing his attention back. You wanted the federal bid information. Take it. Greed overrode caution. He pushed past me to the safe, grabbing for what he thought were plans worth $40 million. Instead, he found a single sheet of paper with 5 words. I know everything, Dad. What is this? He spun around the paper, crumpling in his fist. The FBI knows too, I said calmly. They've been watching you for weeks, recording everything, building a case not just against you, but against Laura Judge Whitman and everyone else in your network. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone and showed him a text from Patricia Hayes. All units in position, waiting for your signal. The color drained from his face entirely. You set me up. Your own son. You set yourself up the moment you betrayed everything I taught you. I stood, feeling every one of my 65 years, but standing tall anyway. The federal bid information you wanted, I gave it to you last week, and you passed it to Laura 2 days ago. The FBI tracked every move. His phone rang. Laura's name flashed on the screen. He answered automatically, his voice hollow. What? Even from across the room I could hear her panicked voice. Something about FBI agents at her door. Judge Whitman being arrested at the courthouse. Their whole world crumbling. David dropped the phone, staring at me with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. You destroyed me. Your own flesh and blood. No, son. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure you couldn't destroy anyone else in the process. That's when he lunged for the power of attorney papers, probably thinking he could still force me to sign. But I'd anticipated this too. The door opened, and Patricia Hayes entered with 2 FBI agents. David Cooper, you're under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, fraud, and violation of the RICO Act. She nodded to me as the agents cuffed my son. Mr. Cooper, thank you for your cooperation. Dad, please. David's bravado crumbled as the handcuffs clicked. Don't do this. Think of Marcus, the new baby. Think of Sarah. I am thinking of them. They deserve better than a father in prison, but that's still better than a father who'd sell his soul for money. I turned to Patricia. There's a family gathering in my dining room. Could you? We'll be discreet, she assured me. Though I'm afraid we'll need to search the house for evidence. As they led David away, he looked back one last time. I'll never forgive you for this. I'll never forgive myself for not seeing it sooner, I replied. But sometimes love means letting someone face the consequences of their choices. Carl put a hand on my shoulder as we watched them take my son away. You did the right thing, Mason. Did I? I looked around the study, where I'd helped David with homework, where he'd played as I worked on bids, where I'd dreamed of passing the company to him someday. I just sent my only child to prison. You just saved dozens of honest businesses and hundreds of jobs, Carl corrected. And you saved those grandchildren from growing up with a criminal for a father. We returned to the dining room to find it in controlled chaos. FBI agents were explaining the situation to our guests, while maintaining professional calm. Sarah sat with Marcus in her lap, tears streaming down her face, but her chin raised bravely. Thomas held Helen, who looked shocked, but not entirely surprised. Is it over? Sarah asked when she saw me. The arrest part is. The legal process is just beginning. I knelt beside her chair. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I already knew, she said quietly. In my heart, I knew something was terribly wrong. I just didn't want to believe it. Patricia Hayes approached. Mr. Cooper, we'll need you to come to the federal building tomorrow for a full debriefing. The investigation is expanding rapidly. Laura Whitman was arrested trying to flee to the airport. Judge Whitman is in custody. We've frozen all the offshore accounts. The other contractors who were involved. Warrants are being served across the city as we speak. This is the largest corruption case we've seen in decades. She paused. Your son's cooperation could reduce his sentence significantly. That's his choice to make, I said. I've made mine. As the FBI finished their work, and our guests began to leave, each offering support and condolences, I found myself alone with Sarah and Marcus in the garden. The boy was building something with his blocks, innocent of the fact that his world had just changed forever. What do we do now? Sarah asked. We rebuild, I said, watching my grandson stack block upon block with determined concentration. We protect the innocent, help those who were hurt, and try to create something better from the ruins. Will you visit him in prison? I thought about it for a long moment. Maybe. Someday. When I can look at him and see my son again, instead of the stranger he became. Sarah took my hand. You're the strongest man I know, Mason, and the most honorable. David forgot that. He thought your kindness was weakness. He learned the hard way that it wasn't, I said, though I'd give anything for the lesson to have been different. As the sun set over the garden where David had played as a child, where he'd married Sarah, where he'd announced their first pregnancy, I allowed myself to grieve. Not for the man he'd become, but for the boy he'd been, and the man he could have been. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and testimony, and the slow wheels of justice. But tonight, I sat with what remained of my family, and tried to find hope in my grandson's innocent laughter and my daughter-in-law's quiet strength. The old wolf had won the battle, but victory tasted like ashes and broken dreams. The next morning, I arrived at the federal building to find a media circus. News of the arrests had broken overnight, and reporters swarmed like vultures. "Mr. Cooper, how does it feel to turn in your own son? Did you know about the corruption all along? Will Mason Construction survive?" Patricia Hayes met me at a side entrance, avoiding the cameras. "Sorry about that. Someone leaked the story, probably trying to control the narrative." "Let them talk," I said. "The truth will come out in court." The debriefing took 6 hours. I laid out everything from the moment Frank grabbed my wrist at Freshmart to David's arrest in my study. FBI agents showed me evidence I hadn't known about. The corruption went deeper than even James Morrison had discovered. "Your son was actually small-time compared to what we're uncovering," Agent Rodriguez explained, spreading out a chart that looked like a spider's web. The Whitmans were running similar schemes in 6 states: construction, healthcare, technology sectors, billions in rigged contracts. How many victims? Over 200 companies that we know of. Some went bankrupt. 3 owners committed suicide after losing everything. He pointed to photos on the wall. "Your testimony is going to put away some very dangerous people, Mr. Cooper." Patricia entered with a laptop. "We've been going through the seized computers. Mason, you need to see this." She played a video from David's laptop. It was a recording he'd made secretly in my office 3 months ago. I watched myself explaining the company's bidding strategy for the highway project we'd lost. But then, the video continued after I'd left the room. David stood there staring at my desk with such hatred it made my stomach turn. 40 years of playing it safe," he said to the empty room. 40 years of integrity and honor. You could have been rich, Dad. We could have owned this city. But you wanted to be the noble Mason Cooper, everyone's hero. Well, heroes end up broke and forgotten. It's time for a new way." Patricia closed the laptop. "There are dozens of these. He recorded you constantly looking for anything he could use. But Mason, we also found something else." She pulled up financial records. "The $8 million judgment against your company, Judge Whitman, was paid $500,000 to rule against you. The safety violations were completely fabricated by Brenner Industries, your biggest competitor. David knew. He arranged it. The lawsuit was designed to weaken you, make you dependent on him. When that didn't work fast enough, he moved to Plan B." I stared at the evidence of my son's betrayal, each document another knife wound. He destroyed our company's reputation for a bribe. He was playing a long game. Weaken the company, force you out, take over with Laura's backing, then rebuild using corrupt contracts. Your resistance just made him escalate. Agent Rodriguez leaned forward. "There's more. We found communications suggesting David was considering more permanent solutions." "Permanent?" "He researched your life insurance policies extensively. Looked up information about making deaths look accidental. We can't prove intent, but my son might have been planning to kill me." The thought hit like a physical blow. I'd raised a boy who grew into a man capable of patricide for profit. "I need some air," I managed to say. On the roof of the federal building, I stood looking out over the city I'd helped build. Somewhere down there were the schools, hospitals, and offices Mason Construction had created. Solid structures built with honest work, now tainted by association with David's crimes. Patricia found me there. "I'm sorry you had to learn that. We debated telling you. I needed to know, all of it." I turned to face her. "What happens now?" "We build our case. With your evidence and testimony, we can guarantee convictions for most of the network. David's looking at 20 to 30 years unless he cooperates." "Will he?" "His lawyer is pushing for a deal. Full cooperation in exchange for 15 years. He'd have to testify against the Whitmans and the others." 15 years. Marcus would be in college. The new baby would be in high school. They'd grow up without their father visiting him in federal prison if Sarah allowed it. "There's something else," Patricia said. We've recovered most of the stolen money. It will be returned to the victimized companies after the trial. Mason Construction should recover several million. Blood money. Restitution for betrayal. Give our portion to the families of the men who killed themselves. They need it more than I do. Back inside, James Morrison was waiting with more information. The Whitman House of Cards is collapsing. Laura's turning state's evidence, claiming Harold forced her into it. Harold's claiming Laura corrupted him. They're racing to see who can betray the other faster. And the contractors who bought information. 17 arrests so far. More coming. Your industry is going to be transformed, Mason. The corrupt are being weeded out. That afternoon, I met with Carl and Sarah at my lawyer's office. She looked exhausted, but determined, Marcus, coloring quietly beside her. The divorce will be straightforward, Carl explained. Given the circumstances, David won't be able to contest it. Assets in his name alone will be frozen for restitution. Joint assets default to Sarah. I don't want his money, Sarah said firmly. I want a clean break. The children deserve support, I said. I'll establish trust funds for their education and needs. Mason, you don't have to. Yes, I do. They're my grandchildren. David's crimes shouldn't punish them. I watched Marcus carefully color within the lines. They'll need strong role models growing up. Carl cleared his throat. There's also the matter of the company. David's shares revert to you, but the reputation damage? We'll rebuild. New name, new structure. Employee-owned with safeguards against this ever happening again. I'd been thinking about it all day. Mason Construction dies with David's betrayal. Something better will rise from its ashes. That evening, I found myself back at the cemetery, telling Margaret everything. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. I failed him somehow, I said to her headstone. Failed to teach him what really mattered. Failed to see what he was becoming. The wind rustled through the trees, and this time, I didn't imagine her voice. I just felt her presence, the same steady strength that had sustained me through war and peace success, and failure joy and grief. My phone rang. Frank's name appeared on the screen. Mason, you need to turn on the news. I drove home and found every channel covering the story. Corruption scandal rocks, construction industry. Federal judge arrested in bribery scheme. Son betrays father in $1 million conspiracy. But it was the interview with David that stopped my heart. He stood in orange jail clothes, his lawyer beside him, facing the cameras with defiance instead of remorse. My father is a vindictive old man who couldn't accept changing times, he said. I was trying to modernize our business, make connections, and he saw conspiracy everywhere. This is about control, not corruption. He'd rather destroy his own son than admit he's become irrelevant. The reporter asked about the evidence. David's lawyer intervened, but not before David added, evidence can be fabricated. My father has powerful friends. Ask yourself who benefits from this witch hunt. I turned off the television feeling sick. Even now, even caught red-handed, he was trying to manipulate the narrative. No acceptance of guilt, no remorse, just more lies and deflection. Sarah called immediately. I saw it. I'm so sorry, Mason. How can he still be lying? Because admitting the truth means admitting he's not the victim, I said. It's easier to blame others than face what you've become. The news mentioned he might get a plea deal. 15 years instead of 30. That's up to the prosecutors. And him. I paused. Sarah, whatever happens, you and the children are welcome in my life. Don't let his poison touch them. I won't, she promised. We're staying with my parents for now, but Mason Marcus keeps asking for Grandpa. You're the only stable male figure in his life. After we hung up, I sat in my study surrounded by the remnants of David's trap. The power of attorney forms he'd wanted me to sign. The forged documents. The evidence of systematic betrayal. Patricia Hayes had asked if I wanted to keep any of it. I'd told her to burn it all after the trial. Some memories were too poisonous to preserve. My phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. Boss, the crew wanted you to know we're behind you. 100%. Whatever the company becomes next, we're in. Then another from Thomas. Saw the news. David's lies fool no one who knows you. Stand tall. And another from Carl. Reporters calling for statements. I'm handling them. You focus on healing. By midnight, I'd received dozens of messages of support. Former employees, current clients, old friends, even competitors who'd lost fairly to us over the years. David had tried to destroy my reputation, along with everything else, but 40 years of honest dealings couldn't be erased by one bitter interview. I pulled out legal pads and started sketching plans for the new company. Employee ownership structure, mandatory ethics training, financial transparency protocols, background checks for anyone handling sensitive information. If something good could come from this nightmare, it would be a business model that made David's type of betrayal impossible. The doorbell rang at 1 in the morning. I found Frank on my porch with a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses. Figured you could use a drink and a friend, he said simply. We sat on the back deck, sipping bourbon under the stars, not talking about David or trials or betrayal. Instead, we remembered Vietnam and the brothers we'd lost there. We talked about building lives after war, about the families we'd raised, about getting old in a world that seemed to change faster every year. You did the right thing, Frank said eventually. Hard as hell, but right. Did I? Sometimes I wonder if I should have handled it privately, kept it in the family, and let him keep destroying other families. No, Mason. Evil flourishes when good men do nothing. You did something. After he left, I stayed on the deck, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in the city, David sat in a cell, probably still plotting how to spin this to his advantage. Laura Whitman was likely calculating what information to trade for a lighter sentence. Judge Whitman faced the ruins of a career built on corruption. And tomorrow I'd face the cameras and questions and the long journey through the justice system. But I'd face it with clean hands and a clear conscience, knowing that however much it hurt, I'd chosen truth over comfortable lies. The old wolf had one more battle to fight. Not against external enemies this time, but against the temptation to let bitterness take root where love used to live. That was David's path, and I'd seen where it led. I chose a different road. Harder, lonelier perhaps, but one that led toward light instead of deeper into darkness. 6 months later, I sat in the federal courthouse watching my son take the witness stand. He'd lost weight in custody, his designer suits replaced by a simple gray outfit. But his eyes still held that defiance, that refusal to truly accept responsibility. David's testimony was part of his plea agreement. 15 years instead of 30, in exchange for detailing the entire conspiracy. As he spoke, laying out the web of corruption in clinical detail, I saw the prosecutor's strategy. He was damning himself with every word, revealing not just crimes, but the cold calculation behind them. Mr. Cooper, the prosecutor said, please tell the court about your father's involvement in these schemes. David's eyes found mine in the gallery. My father knew nothing. He was too trusting, too focused on his outdated ideas of business ethics to see what was happening around him. Even now, he couldn't resist the insult wrapped in exoneration. The prosecutor pressed further. You systematically betrayed that trust. I pursued opportunities he was too rigid to consider. David replied, still trying to reframe his crimes as business innovation. Sarah sat beside me, her hand occasionally squeezing mine when David's lies became too much. She'd grown stronger these past months, finalizing the divorce, starting therapy, focusing on the children. Her pregnancy was showing now, and she'd decided to keep the baby despite everything. That child is innocent, she'd told me. Whatever David did, this baby deserves a chance at a better life. Laura Whitman testified next, throwing everyone under the bus in her desperation to reduce her 20-year sentence. She painted David as an eager conspirator who'd approached her with offers of information. Then, she implicated 12 other judges, 43 contractors, and a network of corruption that stretched to the state capitol. Judge Harold Whitman's trial was separate. But we'd watched his sentencing the week before. 25 years in federal prison, his reputation destroyed, his fortune seized for restitution. He'd stood there in chains, this man who'd once wielded such power, reduced to begging for mercy that wouldn't come. The trials continued for weeks. Each day brought new revelations, more conspirators exposed, another piece of the network dismantled. I testified twice, laying out how I'd discovered the betrayal and worked with the FBI to document it. Cross-examination was brutal, with defense lawyers trying to paint me as a vindictive father, destroying his son out of spite. But the evidence spoke louder than their insinuations. Video recordings, financial documents, David's own words captured on hidden cameras. The jury saw it all, including the moment in my study, when he'd admitted everything, thinking he'd won. On the day of David's sentencing, the courthouse was packed. Media victims of the conspiracy, curiosity seekers. I sat in the front row, where he could see me, wanting him to know I was there, bearing witness to the consequences of his choices. The judge, a stern woman with 30 years on the bench, reviewed the case with careful precision. "Mr. Cooper, you held a position of trust in your father's company. You had every advantage, education, opportunity, a father who believed in you. Yet you chose to betray that trust for personal gain." David stood straighter still, trying to project confidence. "Your cooperation has earned you consideration," the judge continued. "But your lack of genuine remorse troubles this court. You've testified against your co-conspirators, not out of conscience, but self-interest. You've shown no real understanding of the harm you've caused." She looked directly at him. "David Mason Cooper, I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years supervised probation. You are to pay restitution of $800,000 to the victims of your crimes. May you use this time to reflect on what you've lost and why." The gavel fell with finality. David turned as the bailiffs approached, his eyes meeting mine one last time. I saw many things there. Anger, regret, a flicker of the boy he'd been. But no real remorse, no understanding. He was led away, and I knew it would be years before I could bear to see him again. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. This time, I didn't avoid them. "Mr. Cooper, how do you feel about your son's sentence?" I looked directly into the cameras. "I feel profound sadness for the victims of this conspiracy. For the honest businesses destroyed, the workers who lost jobs, the families torn apart by greed. My son was part of that destruction, and he's facing the consequences. I pray he uses this time to become a better man." "Will you visit him in prison?" "When he's ready to have an honest conversation about what he's done and why. Not before." "What about Mason Construction?" "Mason Construction is dead, but from its foundation, we're building Phoenix Builders, an employee-owned company, with transparency and ethics at its core. We'll prove that honest business isn't just possible, it's profitable." The questions continued, but Miguel appeared at my elbow. "Boss, the crew's waiting at the site." We drove to what had been Mason Construction's headquarters. The sign was already down, replaced by a temporary banner reading, "Phoenix Builders Rising from the Ashes." 200 workers had gathered, men and women who'd stayed loyal despite the scandal, who believed we could build something better. "I won't lie to you," I told them, standing on a makeshift platform. "The road ahead is hard. Some clients won't trust us. Some competitors will try to exploit our weakness. But we have something they don't. We have the truth. We have each other. And we have the chance to prove that integrity isn't weakness, it's strength." The cheers were loud enough to echo off the surrounding buildings. We were bloodied, but not broken, and everyone there knew it. Over the following months, Phoenix Builders slowly gained momentum. We started with small projects, repairs and renovations for clients who'd known me for decades. Each job was completed on time, under budget, with meticulous attention to quality. Word spread. New clients called, curious about this company born from scandal, but committed to transparency. Sarah brought the children to visit regularly. Marcus helped me plant a tree outside the new offices, a symbol of growth and new beginnings. When the baby was born, A healthy girl she named Hope. I was the second person to hold her after the doctors. "She'll never know him," Sarah said quietly as we watched Hope sleep. "Is that wrong, to keep her from her father?" "She'll know of him," I said, "when she's old enough to understand. But she'll define herself by who she becomes, not by what he did." Thomas retired from his job to help with the children becoming the grandfather figure they needed. He and I spent evenings teaching Marcus to build with blocks, then Legos, then simple woodworking projects. The boy had steady hands and a careful nature, the opposite of his father's impulsiveness. A year after the trial, I received a letter from David. The prison stationery was stark, his handwriting smaller than I remembered. "Dad, I know you won't believe me, but I think about what you taught me every day. Not the business lessons, the other things. About honor and trust and building things that last. I understand now why you turned me in. I'm not ready to apologize, not yet. The anger is still too strong. But maybe someday. David." I read it 3 times, then filed it away. It wasn't an apology or real acceptance of guilt, but it was a crack in the armor of his denial. Maybe given enough years, the crack would widen enough for genuine remorse to enter. Frank retired from security work and came to Phoenix as our head of internal compliance. "Figure I spent 3 months watching your boy betray you," he said. "Least I can do is make sure it never happens again." James Morrison wrote a book about the case, donating the proceeds to a fund for the families of white-collar crime victims. Patricia Hayes was promoted, eventually becoming U.S. Attorney for our district. Even Carl Brennan saw his practice grow as businesses sought lawyers who'd stood for integrity when it mattered. On the 2nd anniversary of David's arrest, I stood in the cemetery talking to Margaret again. But this time, I had good news to share. Phoenix just won the contract for the new children's hospital. I told her stone. Honest bid, fair competition. We're employing 300 people now, all part owners. Sarah's in community college studying to become a teacher. Marcus is thriving, and Hope just took her first steps. The wind was gentle this time, warm with approaching spring. "I still love our son," I continued. "Always will. But I've learned something. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable destruction. Sometimes you have to let someone fall and face the consequences, even if it breaks your heart to watch." A hand touched my shoulder. Sarah stood there with the children flowers for Margaret's grave in her free hand. "We thought Grandma might like some company," Marcus said solemnly, placing his small bouquet next to my larger one. We stood there together, 3 generations linked by loss, but not defined by it. Phoenix Builders was thriving. The children were healthy and happy. Sarah had found her strength. And somewhere in a federal prison, David was hopefully finding his way back to the man he could have been. I'd started this journey as an old wolf protecting his territory. I was ending it as a grandfather, building a legacy that couldn't be stolen or corrupted. The company safe now held trust documents and employee ownership papers instead of secrets and betrayal. The hidden cameras were gone, replaced by an open-door policy that made deception pointless. As we walked back to our cars, Marcus slipped his hand into mine. "Grandpa, will you teach me to build a treehouse?" "Of course, buddy. We'll start this weekend." "Can Hope help when she's bigger?" "Everyone can help. That's how the best things get built together, with everyone doing their part." Sarah smiled at me over the children's heads, and I saw Margaret's strength in her eyes. We'd survived the worst betrayal possible, and emerged not unscathed, but unbroken. That was its own kind of victory. To those watching or reading this story, I ask you, have you ever had to choose between enabling someone you love and holding them accountable? How do you balance love with justice, forgiveness with consequences? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking and subscribing to hear more about rebuilding after betrayal, the power of integrity in business, and how families can heal even from the deepest wounds. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that choosing truth over comfortable lies while painful leads to a better tomorrow. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May you always have the courage to do what's right, especially when it's hardest. And remember, sometimes the old wolf's greatest strength isn't in his bite, but in his willingness to protect the pack even from itself. Stay strong, stay honest, and keep building something worth leaving behind.